economy back on communities that rely on this program as a lifeline. Madam President, I yield the floor. Is it just the absence of quorum?
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Senator from West Virginia.
I ask that the order of the quorum call be rescinded.
Without objection, morning business is closed. Under the previous order, the Senate will resume consideration of S-223, which the clerk will report.
Calendar number 5, S-223, a bill to modernize the air traffic control system and so forth and for other purposes.
I thank you. I understand that the senator from Montana wants to make a modification.
Right. Madam President.
Senator from Montana.
My amendment number 75 be modified further with the changes that are at the desk.
Is there objection? Without objection.
And I thank my good friend from West Virginia. He's a good man.
I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Well, we're standing by for the resumption of work on FAA reauthorization here in the Senate. They were scheduled to begin that at 11. Coming up at noon, the Senate is expected to vote on the Nelson Amendment regarding the distribution of FAA screening X-rays. That's subject to a 60-vote vote threshold. At 12:30, the Senate will recess for their weekly policy lunches until 2:15, and then at 2:25 they'll vote on the Wicker Amendment regarding TSA collective bargaining. We'll have it all here for you on C-SPAN 2. President Obama right now is fielding questions about his $3.7 trillion budget that he submitted to Congress yesterday. He's holding his first solo news conference of the year. It's really the first chance that reporters are getting to question the president about the budget, and it's happening right now in the South Court Auditorium of the White House. It started at 11 a.m. about 10 minutes ago, and you can see it on our companion network, C-SPAN. A quorum call on the floor of the Senate as we're standing by for senators to resume work on FAA reauthorization. That was set to start at 11 this morning, but as you can see, they're running just a little bit behind. The House is in recess until noon as they start working on federal funding for the rest of this fiscal year. It'll be about an hour of general debate and further debate only on amendments related to federal spending. It's likely to consume most of the business in the House for the rest of the week. About 400 amendments are up for consideration. You can see the House live on our companion network, C-SPAN. And President Obama right now is discussing his budget proposal. He's holding his first news conference of the year. It is it's the first chance for reporters to ask the President about the budget, and you can see it right now on our companion network, C-SPAN.
President.
Senator from New Hampshire.
Mr. President, I ask that the quorum call be lifted.
Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. President, I'm here to speak on the legislation that's pending before us. We all know that this country faces big challenges. We face a declining infrastructure that's critical to our businesses. We need safe, reliable transportation if we're going to keep the flow of commerce moving. But as President Obama mentioned in his State of the Union address, when American engineers took a look at our transportation infrastructure, they gave it a D grade. That's not quite failing, but it's certainly not very good. Our declining infrastructure threatens not only our safety, but also our global economic competitiveness. America is falling behind economic competitors like Europe and China, which are making significantly more robust investments in their infrastructure. In the United States, we currently spend about 2% of our GDP on infrastructure. That's a 50% decline since 1960. China and Europe, on the other hand, spend close to 9% for China and 5% for Europe of their GDP, respectively, on infrastructure. We need to make the kind of smart investments that will help keep America competitive. That's why I'm very glad that we're moving forward with this bipartisan FAA reauthorization bill. It's been almost 4 years since Congress passed an FAA bill. And in that time, our economic competitors have continued to invest in their 21st century aviation systems. Airports are critical to commerce and economic activity in all of our states. The major airport in my home state of New Hampshire, Manchester Airport, generates over $1.2 billion in economic activity every year. Much of that comes from out-of-state residents and foreign travelers. Without that airport, without that air infrastructure, we wouldn't be able to generate that kind of economic activity. The aviation industry in New Hampshire and across the country also provides good jobs for pilots, flight attendants, mechanics, air traffic controllers, and so many others. Manchester Airport alone provides over 1,900 jobs. The FAA legislation that's now before us will accomplish the long overdue task of upgrading one critical component of our aviation infrastructure, the air traffic control system. It will upgrade the system to an efficient 21st century system called NextGen. Now, I don't think very many people realize that when they get into an airplane, the pilots and the air traffic controllers are using a 20th century technology to navigate the skies. I was just at a meeting of the High-Tech Council in New Hampshire and having this conversation with them. They didn't realize that that's the kind of aviation system that we use to fly our planes. So although our cell phones and cars have GPS systems, our multi-million-dollar airplanes use World War II-era radar systems. The system we have now is inefficient. It wastes the time and money of everyone involved in the aviation industry. As Chairman Rockefeller has pointed out so many times, even Mongolia has a more advanced air traffic control system than we do. That is just unacceptable. And not surprisingly, our outdated system is at capacity. According to the FAA, delays resulting from the constraints on the system cost the United States over $9 billion every year. That number is going to continue to rise if we do nothing. We need to take action. The FAA forecasts that the aviation system will carry more than 1 billion airline passengers annually by 2023. We cannot afford to let such an important part of our 21st century economy languish with 20th century technology. By investing in NextGen, our air traffic controllers will finally have the 21st century technologies they need to make our system more efficient. And let me just give an example of the progress that NextGen would make. Right now, air traffic controllers give all of their commands to pilots over the radio. They tell them when and where they'll be landing. Now, because all of the pilots in the area are listening, there's the potential for miscommunication sometimes. Our pilots and controllers are very professional. They do their jobs well. But sometimes people talk over each other. Pilots hear the wrong information. This system that we currently have wastes time, and it puts the flying public in jeopardy. Once NextGen is in place, controllers will be able to type a command and send it directly to the plane. To all of us who use email, this sounds pretty basic, but it's an example of the kind of upgrades that are needed to make our aviation system more efficient and safer. By funding NextGen, this bill will bring our air traffic control system into the 21st century. NextGen will reduce congestion by allowing planes to fly more direct routes. It will conserve energy, and it will make flying safer for everyone. Now, of course, some flight delays are just unavoidable. We can't control the weather, as we all know. But when delays can't be avoided, we can make sure that airlines are treating their customers fairly. That's another critical component of this legislation. That's why this bill includes the Passengers' Bill of Rights. I co-sponsored the Passengers' Bill of Rights after a businesswoman from Bedford, New Hampshire, a woman named Jennifer Shirkani, told me her stories of being stuck on tarmacs for hours without access to food and water. These experiences were so frustrating to Jennifer that she became a leader in the movement to get this legislation passed. Unfortunately, her stories have been all too common in recent years. According to the Department of Transportation, hundreds of thousands of passengers have been stuck on the tarmac for more than 3 hours. This bill will codify protections put in place last year by the Department of Transportation, so we won't go back to the days when airlines left travelers on the tarmac. I want to commend Chairman Rockefeller and Ranking Member Hutchinson for producing a strong bill, and I look forward to being able to support this legislation with all of my colleagues and pass it very soon so we can upgrade our transportation system to compete with the rest of the world. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from West Virginia.
Got the state right. Mr. President, I have 7 unanimous consent requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have the approval of the majority and minority leaders. I ask unanimous consent that these requests be agreed to and that these requests be printed in the record.
Without objection.
Thank you. I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Mr. President.
Senator from Texas.
Mr. President,
We're in a quorum call.
I ask unanimous consent that the quorum call be lifted.
Without objection.
We are working very hard, Mr. President, to have an amendment on the perimeter rule that would accommodate all the concerns of Western senators who do not have easy access to Washington Reagan National Airport, and the concerns of the Virginia senators who are concerned about congestion. And other senators from the far west that want to try to have a better chance at a direct flight. Senator Rockefeller and I have filed an amendment that we think is a fair approach, and we did this because we didn't have enough consensus, and we are trying to drive that consensus. So I would like to offer the amendment, ask that the amendment be brought up. It is our intention then to set it aside for Senator Nelson's amendment, which is scheduled for a vote. And I have informed everyone that I am going to ask the clerk to call up amendment number 84, the Rockefeller-Hutchison amendment on the perimeter rule.
Mr. President.
Is there objection?
Mr. President, reserving the right to object. I know my colleagues from who are the ranking member and the chairman of the committee have been working diligently to try to resolve this issue. It certainly is a thorny one, given the history of the Commerce Committee and previous votes on this issue. The issue for me is I certainly do want access to the West, certainly want to make sure that the nation's capital is accessible to all parts of the country. But we also want to make sure that there is a fair process, that a decision to open up access to National Airport is run through the Department of Transportation and an FAA process, that we don't handpick here on the Senate floor any of the people who would be winners in this process, but that we make the decision on how much access is available. Now, I would say to my colleagues, the whole issue here about airports is that anytime you've had a limited footprint, you have had discussion about how to give access to that through a process of the FAA. So I would say to my colleague, let's keep dialoguing and working on this issue, but a process and an amendment that includes conversion, that is to say that a predominant carrier out of National Airport can continue to hold that dominance in the marketplace, I think is the wrong approach. I look at what's happening now with what the Department of Justice has said about the Delta U.S. Air swap between New York and DCA. They basically have said they have too much market share and they ought to divest if they want to engage in that kind of swap behavior. So any kind of conversion process that would allow slots to be converted is like saying if you own real estate around the Capitol, then you can buy more real estate around the Capitol. And so I hope that we can come up with a process that puts the FAA in charge of this, opens up how much access, but not make the decision here on the Senate floor, allow the FAA and DOT to do their job as they have on this issue in the past. So, Mr. President, at this point in time, I will object to the Senator's proposal.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President.
Senator from
I would
Texas.
just ask unanimous consent to have 1 minute to respond to the objection.
Is there objection? Without objection.
Mr. President, the reason for the conversions was to accommodate the needs of the Washington National Airport people and to also understand that the incumbent carriers, of which there are 4, have mostly paid the lion's share of the cost of the additions to Washington National Airport. And we do want a fair process. That's why we have separated the new entrants, which would be 5, to accommodate carriers that have no presence, but also have conversions of flights that are already in place, so that there would be fewer new flights into Washington National, and there would be a fair process with the incumbent carriers who have paid such a lion's share of the airport to keep competitive, to keep it competitive and fair. So with that, we will continue to discuss. We hope we can have an amendment that can be voted on, and I think it is imperative that we vote on this so that there is a Senate position. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.
Under the previous order, there will now be 20 minutes of debate equally divided on the Nelson Amendment, number 58.
Mr. President.
The senator from Nebraska.
President, the amendment which Senator Schumer, Akaka, Shaheen, Tester, yourself, the chair, White House, Menendez, and Senator Bill Nelson from Florida, and I have offered, which we'll be voting on shortly, is a common sense approach to addressing the serious issue of protecting an individual's privacy when they pass through security checkpoints at airports and public buildings. Nebraskans and Americans understand that every step must be taken to keep federal buildings and air travel safe in America, particularly after the 9/11 attacks. However, as we promote security, safeguards are necessary to protect everybody's privacy from misuse of images generated by body scanning machines. Our legislation sends a common sense message. We won't ignore people's privacy as we make sure air travel in federal buildings are safe. The amendment is very straightforward. It would, number one, make it a crime to photograph or record a body scan image or distribute a body scan image taken at either an airport or any federal building without express authorization to do so either by law or regulation. Second, it imposes a penalty of up to 1 year in prison and $100,000 fine on violators. And third, we provide an exception from prosecution if the actions taken occur while an individual is engaged in their official duties during the course of an authorized intelligence investigation or criminal prosecution. This language, which was worked out with officials at the FBI and DNI, are important. This is not an abstract concern. There's already been a case where these images have been taken and posted online inappropriately, and so it's my hope that by creating a deterrent, a very strong deterrent, and establishing criminal penalties for those who take and distribute body scan images inappropriately, that will help prevent that from occurring again. Mr. President, by adopting this amendment, we're telling our constituents that we're not going to ignore their privacy in the process of making sure we have safe airports and federal buildings. I ask my colleagues to support our amendment, and I also will be calling up a second-degree amendment as the details are worked out. And I call up second-degree amendment number 85, which is at the desk, and ask that it be modified with the changes that are at the desk.
Under the previous order, the second-degree amendment, as modified, is agreed to.
I ask my colleagues, Mr. President, to support our amendment, and I ask for the ayes and nays, and I believe other colleagues are here to...
Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be.
And I believe other colleagues are here to speak. I notice that Senator Schumer is here. Appreciate very much his support, Mr. President, working together very carefully with total collaboration we've been able to, with our colleagues, bring about what I think is important privacy legislation. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from New York.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I want to congratulate my good friend, the senator from good friend and hunting buddy, the senator from Nebraska, for the great work he has done on this. It's been a pleasure to work with him on it. We've had parallel interests, and this amendment hopefully will solve a problem that has arisen lately because of the full-body scanners that are being installed at airports. As everyone knows, late last year, the TSA began installing full-body advanced imaging scanners at airports across the country. These new scanners are better able to quickly and accurately detect explosives than the old scanners and would likely have thwarted the Christmas Day bomber before he had even gotten on the plane. But from the get-go, legitimate questions popped up about the potential for privacy violations from the use of these scanners. What happens if a rogue TSA employee disseminates your full-body image? Or what happens if a fellow passenger or reporter takes pictures of body scan images with his or her phone and mails it to friends or places the picture on a website or in a newspaper? Are there safeguards to prevent such abuses? If it happens, what are the consequences? Obviously, airline safety is our paramount concern. But, Mr. President, we can oftentimes, by carefully legislating, have our cake and eat it too, to make sure that safety stays number one, but make sure as the senator from Nebraska and I are trying to do, make sure that privacy is protected whenever possible. And that's what Senator Nelson and I teamed up to work with the TSA and privacy advocates, to devise a sensible solution to the problem, a solution that would protect privacy without sacrificing safety. The legislation we came up with, which Senator Nelson is now offering as an amendment to the FAA bill, strikes just the right balance. First and foremost, the amendment makes it a federal crime to record and disseminate images from airport scanners. It provides a sentence of up to 1 year in prison, a fine of up to $100,000 per violation for anyone who is convicted of violating the law. I should note the amendment not only covers the misuse of the original images recording from the scanners, but also photographs of scans taken by security personnel, airline employees, passengers, or anybody else. Americans want to know, when they take to the skies, that every possible precaution has been taken for their safety, and at the same time, they want to know that precautions have been taken to ensure their privacy. The amendment would offer the flying public that much-needed assistance. So again, I applaud Senator Nelson. He's a member of the Emerging Threats and Capabilities Subcommittee for his leadership on this issue. I urge my colleagues to support the smart, practical amendment that we are offering today and urge that it be passed as quickly as possible by this body. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Clerk will call the roll.
Note the absence of a quorum.
Mr. Akaka.
Mr. President.
Senator from Arizona.
Thank you. I ask unanimous consent that further proceeding the quorum called be suspended.
Without objection.
Mr. President, since no one is asking to speak on this amendment, I just wanted unanimous consent to put something in the record. We were all celebrating last week what would have been the 100th anniversary of Ronald Reagan. And there was a piece in the Wall Street Journal by one of the economists who advised Ronald Reagan, Arthur Laffer, which I think recounts and discusses probably as good as any other summary that I've ever seen the contribution that Reagan and his administration made to the economy of the United States. And therefore, I would like to insert in the record, not in the middle of this debate, but at the conclusion of this debate, the article from the Wall Street Journal dated February 10th, 2011.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President. Mr. President.
The senator from Nebraska.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to add Senator Bill Nelson from Florida to Amendment Number 58 as an original co-sponsor.
Without objection.
Thank you. And I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
The Senate continues working on FAA reauthorization with votes on amendments set for noon and 2:25 today. Reminder that at 12:30 the Senate will recess for their weekly party policy lunches at until 2:15. Around 2:25, actually, let's start back on the Nelson Amendment, which is coming up at noon. That will be the vote that they'll hold on the distribution of FAA screening X-rays. Again, that's the Nelson Amendment. And then at 2:25, they'll be voting on the Wicker Amendment regarding collective bargaining of the TSA, allowing the TSA to become unionized. Well, President Obama is continuing to defend his budget proposal at his news conference with reporters. You can see it right now on C-SPAN. So far, he said the 2012 budget will force the government to live within its means while still investing in the future. He says he is willing to work with Republicans to make changes to entitlement programs like Social Security and Medicare that threaten the nation's fiscal health. He's also touched on recent protests in the Middle East and Egypt, which brought down Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak. The president says peaceful protests similar to those that brought down the government in Egypt should be allowed to take place on the streets of Iran. You can see his press conference right now on C-SPAN.
Mr. President,